LinkedIn News.
I gave a TED Talk. And initially I thought, this is the most obvious thing. People are going to laugh me off the stage, right? Because I'm going to get up there and say relationships are important. Well, the TED Talk went viral because people were hungry for more information about why this matters, how it matters, right? And so my priority now is to say, okay, I'm not going to publish as many scientific papers in journals that nobody reads. I'm going to spend my time and my energy while I still have it talking about these ideas because they matter so much.
That's Dr. Bob Waldinger, director of the Harvard Study of Adult Development. I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better. Stay tuned to find out why the quality of our relationships is the most important predictor of both a healthy and happy life. Make sure you hit that follow button to get new episodes of our show every week. And if you're a regular listener, thank you. And I have a favor to ask. Consider leaving us a review so we can keep bringing you more of the conversations that you love. By the way, if you're not familiar with the process, here's how to leave a review on Apple. Go to the Everyday Better podcast page, scroll to the bottom, click the number of stars you want to give us, and then right below that, click Write a Review and add your note to us. Thanks so much. Hey everyone, from LinkedIn News, I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better, a personal development podcast where every week I sit down with some of the world's brightest minds and bravest hearts who use science and story to share strategies for how we can flourish individually, in relationship to others, and to the world around us. Welcome to our series, A Season for Flourishing, prioritizing your well-being this fall. As summer ends and a new school year begins, September is the perfect time to check in and ask yourself if you're being intentional about the way you want to live in your personal or your professional life, or if you're on autopilot, like a lot of us are. And we're kicking off the series with the director of the longest longitudinal study ever done on what makes a good life, Harvard University's Dr. Bob Waldinger. He recently co-authored a book about the major findings from that study called The Good Life, Lessons from the World's Longest Scientific Study of Happiness. In it, he reveals what it is that makes life most worth living and contributes to our longevity. If you haven't heard of this study yet, I want you to take a guess before I tell you what they found. Okay, ready? It's our relationships. But it's not just about having them or how many of them we have. It's about the quality of the relationships. So Bob and I sat down to talk about what you need to know about high-quality relationships, the one question you should ask yourself to figure out which relationships are securely attached, how to build new relationships as an adult, and what all of this means for the introverts of the world, which I think that's close to half of us. Here's Bob. I'm really curious just to start with, what's the intention behind the work that you do and the work you've been doing at Harvard?
My intention is to study what life is really like for lots of people. And so the way I do that is through different things. I'm a psychiatrist, so I do psychotherapy every day. At 5 o'clock today, I have a psychotherapy patient. And you take a deep dive with somebody into their life. And I do this study of adult life where we follow thousands of people over 86 years. And that's another way to study life. And then I do Zen. And Zen is absolutely a deep dive into what it means to be alive. So all those things kind of center around this fascination with the human experience. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to be fascinated with other people's houses. We would take a ride in the evening and I'd love looking in other people's windows. When I was an undergraduate, I studied history of medicine, and particularly I was interested in why people did things that I thought were outlandish and what was in their minds that allowed them to do things that didn't make sense to me. I studied witchcraft at Salem. I studied why so many doctors in Germany were happy to cooperate with the Nazis when the Nazis came to power. And there were just a lot of things that made me want to explain, okay, why do people do the things they do? And how do they think about life? And in medicine, I was way more interested in the human mind than I was in the thyroid gland. And, and then I began to study Zen in my 50s. I mean, I never expected to do that. And certainly doing the Harvard study has been something that's been an enormous privilege, getting to follow all these lives.
Well, and I want to talk to you more about the Harvard study, but first I am curious, what drew you to Zen in your 50s?
Well, I'd been interested in Buddhism since my 30s, and I tried meditating on my own, and I could never keep it up.
Yeah.
But I, for a long time, wondered why I worried so much about stupid stuff and why other people worried about stupid stuff. I mean, stuff like fame and wealth and all of that. Like, why? When we're all going to be dead soon and nobody's going to remember what we do, why are we all so preoccupied with these badges of achievement? And Zen really speaks to me about that. I find it a very helpful perspective. And if you've spent your whole adult life at Harvard, you could use some of that perspective.
Fair. Okay, so that question, and I know you start your TED Talk with that millennials, a large percentage of us want to be rich and successful or famous, and that takes up a lot of kind of our headspace and what we assign success or mattering to. Based on what you've learned, what would be your response around, like, why do we want that? Or why do we think we want that?
Well, at the deepest sense, and there's a really good Zen teacher and philosophy professor, his name is David Loy, who writes about this. He says, at the deepest level, all of us have this intuition that there is no fixed me. There's no real self that abides through time. There's no Bob who is like a person who was there the same 20 years ago and is going to be there 20 years from now and will live on after I'm dead. And that there's just no single Bob. There's a Bob that's talking to you right now. There's a Bob that's going to have dinner with my wife. There's a Bob that works with students or patients. None of that is false. They're just different aspects and they're constantly changing, and I'm constantly changing. And that, on the one hand, is interesting. On the other hand, can be scary. Because when you really look for, like, who is Leah? You can't really find her. Where's she located? How do you get hold of her, right? And so one argument is it scares us. And that many of us, as a way to feel more real, try to get a lot of fame or wealth or achieve a lot of stuff. Oh, if I win the Nobel Prize, then I'm a real person.
So then you said that at the deepest sense, what's the closer to the surface sense of why we sort of misidentify these things, fame, success, etc., as a source of a good life or of happiness?
I think because it's the feeling that when I get this thing, I'll be happy. Then I'll be all good. Then things will settle down. Then I won't be sad anymore, right? And you look at other people, look at the curated lives on social media, right? And you say, oh, those people, they've got it all figured out. And they're having happy lives all the time, 24/7. And of course, that's not the truth. But we want so badly to think somebody finally arrives at a place where they don't struggle anymore, where life doesn't have difficult times and ups and downs. I think we all want that so much that we look for things we can measure, like, the number of followers on LinkedIn, or, as, oh, that must be it. Then I'm going to feel really good about myself.
Yeah, it's so seductive, right? It's just the idea of not suffering or just always feeling good is so seductive.
And people say to me, so I'm actually a Zen master. Right? So I've got the highest rank you can get in Zen, right? And people say to me, well, you must be happy all the time. And you don't ever feel lost, or you don't ever have petty thoughts. And I'm like, are you kidding me? There's nobody on the planet who doesn't struggle at times.
So speaking of looking at things to measure, this study that you direct at Harvard, when did it first start? Was it 86 years ago?
Yep. 1938.
Yeah. So talk to me about the study at its beginnings. Was the point to figure out what made a good life?
Actually, it was. It was two studies at first. The one was a group of Harvard College undergrads, sophomores, and they were studied as a way to look at healthy development from adolescence into young adulthood. And now, of course, we smile because if you want to study healthy development, you study all white guys from Harvard. You don't do that.
Right.
So we're constantly having to explain to NIH why they should still fund us. But the other study was also a study of thriving. It was a study of boys from Boston's poorest neighborhoods, but also the most troubled families. Families beset by domestic violence and parental illness and mental illness. And again, the study was to see how do some kids who are born with so much disadvantage, how do they manage to stay on good developmental paths? Can we see some of the special ingredients in their lives that allow them to stay on good paths? So those were they were both studies of thriving at a time when that was almost unheard of. Usually what was studied was what goes wrong in development, because that's what calls our attention. What's wrong? Our minds are actually programmed. We evolved that way to focus on what's wrong. So it's kind of radical to think about, well, what goes right and how do we pinpoint that?
So I know there's been a lot you and your predecessors have learned from the study so far, but tell me some of the most interesting or surprising things.
So there were two big findings. I mean, we've published hundreds of papers. We just published our 11th book, but the findings kind of can be summarized in two big categories. One will not surprise you. It's that if you take care of your health, it really matters for living longer and staying healthy longer. Not a surprise, but so many studies find it now, and it's really important to keep getting that message out there. And that means, preventive health care when we can get it. It means regular exercise, eating well, not abusing alcohol or drugs, not smoking, not becoming obese. All of those things matter a lot. So that's the not surprising finding. The surprising one was that we found that the people who lived the longest and stayed healthiest were the people who were more socially connected to others. Literally the people who saw more people in a given week, but also people who had warmer relationships with others. Many studies have found the same thing, so now we know it's a very robust finding. It's a scientific fact. The reason why it was a surprise is that it made sense to us. You'd be happier if you had better relationships. But how could relationships actually get into your body and change your physiology? That was the question. And we've spent the last 10 years in our lab looking at how that works. Like, what are the mechanisms by which relationships alter our physiology?
So if we go back first to the health piece, I think especially with, our audience, many of them listen to shows that are focused on, health. And I do think there's like a really high side, maybe a low side to a lot of sort of the well-being, wellness culture.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So health can be taken, twisted, and taken out of proportion to the point where we go to extremes, right? And people become obsessed with that. I wonder if there's anything you found in this study that could, first on the health side, sort of allay people's fears of like, I'm not eating organic every day. I'm not only eating, raw food. I'm not, all of these things that people say you should be doing to be healthy.
Yeah. Well, I would say, first of all, unusual diets, which come up all the time, and they've come up throughout history, right? Nobody in our study was on unusual diets, but some people ate in a way that we now consider more healthful, right? So less meat, less saturated fat, more fruits and vegetables, right? Like those things have for a long time been known to keep us healthier. It's not rocket science, and you don't need vast numbers of supplements. I mean, one of my colleagues said that, this $1 billion vitamin and supplement industry basically ends up making really expensive urine. And so
That's amazing.
we're talking about simple stuff. We're talking about, Less junk food, less processed food.
Yes, it's not wild. I love the supplements piece, and I'm like, gosh, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this show might be heartbroken, but thank you for that.
Well, and a lot of people are making money off of this, so I think
Correct. They also might be
they're
richer.
going to be mad at me for saying this.
Well, we'll all get a little more money back in our pockets, right? Based on all the supplements we've probably been buying from Instagram and TikTok and everywhere else.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the relationship side, because I know that's the one that was the big sort of surprise. Can you talk to me more about you said social connections, not just social connections, but warm social connections. What does that mean, first of all? What's a warm social connection?
So the opposite of warm social connection is a relationship that's a source of chronic stress. So chronically acrimonious, angry relationships agitate us. And what we think happens is that it is stress that gets in the body and weakens body systems gradually. So, if you're in a really acrimonious relationship with somebody, that often is hazardous to your health. That doesn't mean you should abandon that relationship. It may mean you need to work as hard as you can to make it better. But it's also true that some relationships are better stepped away from because they are taking such a toll. And a good relationship often is a relationship where people feel less stress. They feel they can be more themselves with the other person. They feel some sense of give and take, some sense of mutuality, rather than one person doing all the giving and the other one doing all the taking. So there are a variety of ways to think about what qualifies as a good relationship.
And I mean, I immediately go to, okay, a relationship like that is maybe more likely with, a parent or family or a partner. But I don't know if that's actually true. Do you notice that there is a specific kind of relationship we need to have in order to have this experience of potentially living a longer life? Can it just be that we're surrounded by a bunch of friends that we have warm relationships with and that's enough? Or do we need something deeper?
It's a great question. So there's no particular relationship that everybody needs, but we studied something that we call security of attachment in the psychological jargon. And what it means is, do I have a connection with somebody who I believe will be there if I'm having a hard time, if I really need help? We actually asked our participants at one point, who could you call in the middle of the night if you were sick or scared? And most people could list several people. Some people couldn't list anybody. Some of those people were married and they didn't list anybody. What we believe is that everybody needs somebody in their life who they feel they could call if they really needed help, or they could reach out to who's next to them. Right? But you need somebody. We think most people need that in order to feel safe to be in the world, right? And of course there are exceptions, but that's kind of the core relationship we think that most people need. And could it be a friend? Could it be a child? Could it be it doesn't have to be any particular person. You don't need a romantic partner for this. So other than that, there's no formula. Could be anybody. Could be a workmate. The possibilities for good relationships are really broad.
And is this statement that you'd make then, which I think is an obvious one for a lot of us at this point, that loneliness is what can kill us?
Yeah. Because we understand that loneliness is actually a stressor, both mentally and also physically. Mm-hmm. They've actually documented that people who sleep alone sleep less soundly than people who are not alone. And we think that we evolved to do better in herds, right? Because it's safer. You survive better if you're with other people than if you're alone out on the savannah or wherever our ancestors might have been, right? And so the idea is that we may have, as a species, evolved to feel safer when we're not alone.
So that's the kind of like headline, is that we need warm relationships. And actually, I'm going to dig a little deeper into this, because in reality, of course, even our closest relationships can't be warm all the time.
No.
So then how do you sort of quantify how you know something is warm, but also, positively challenging?
I'll give you a story from our research. At one point, we brought couples into our laboratory and we had them argue with each other. And we said, pick something that you two normally fight about. It could be kids or housework or anything. And would you be willing to talk about it with each other for 10 minutes while we videotape you? And we set the cameras going, and the couple quickly forgot about the cameras and they were just right down the rabbit hole. They were just going at it. And then we had research assistants watch the videos and rate how much they expressed different emotions. And what we found was that when we wanted to predict which couples were going to be together and happy 5 years later, it wasn't how angry they were during their argument. It was whether even during their argument, you could see affection and you could see respect. So it's not that you can't get angry. It's not that you can't disagree. In fact, no relationship of any significance is without disagreement. It's how we work our disagreements out. Do we work them out with affection, with respect? Do we work them out in a way where nobody comes away feeling like they lost or like they're demeaned somehow? Whether both people feel okay coming out of the disagreement.
You mentioned earlier, and I think this is something that comes up, especially on social media, sort of this culture of, if someone is toxic, get them out of your lives. If someone is, and I don't need, so much so that I don't know what toxic means anymore. I don't think it means anything. I think it means if they piss you off,
Yeah.
if you don't like what they say, get rid of them. Yeah. But you're saying no, you're saying it doesn't mean that you have to be away from people that, you have challenging or, stressful relationships with. It's that you put in the work potentially.
Exactly. And in fact, you don't want to just be with people who agree with you. You don't want to just be with yes people all the time, right? There's a great story. I don't know if you know of the Zen teacher Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese monk. So you probably know he ran a community, he led a community in France, Plum Village. And the story is that there was a man there who was just obnoxious. He was just a jerk. And at one point he left, and the other residents were so happy that he left. And Thich Nhat Hanh went and brought him back and actually offered him money to come back and continue to live in Plum Village.
Wow.
And people were saying, why did you do that? He said, because we learn so much from him, right? We learn from people who challenge us, from people who show us, our own need to have life a certain way, right? And so certainly we don't want to be in relationships where we're never challenged.
Before we go on break, let's recap. Having a high-quality relationship with someone doesn't mean you agree with them all the time. It doesn't even mean you like them all the time. Differing opinions and opposing viewpoints actually give us opportunities for learning, for growth, and for compassion. So cherish those moments of interpersonal conflict as opportunities for, not roadblocks to, greater connection. We'll be right back with Bob Waldinger on how to create new bonds and strengthen existing ones as adults. And we're back with Bob Waldinger. If we're coming back to this study, I'm thinking about, not just the idea of how we think about our relationships from a perspective of if they're warm and if we have social connections, but how many do we need? When I think about introverts or people who maybe feel socially anxious, what did you find there to, again, hopefully allay people's worries that they may not live a good life if they're introverted or less social?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Some people have said, well, should I just go throw myself in front of a bus if I'm introverted?
Please don't.
Absolutely not.
Right.
There's no formula. There's no number of relationships that's right for everybody. As you're sort of saying, there are people who are more introverted, people who are more extroverted. Many of us are kind of a combination of the two. We're somewhere on a spectrum. So each person has to determine for themselves, what's the right balance for me of solitude and being with other people. For introverts, having a lot of people around is actually stressful. It might break down your health, right? If you're forced to be with lots of people lots of the time. And so really what we want is for everybody to be able to check in with themselves and say, do I have what I need? Do I have what I want? Or do I need more? Do I need less socializing? Right? And that's a highly individual determination that each of us can make.
I mean, as adults, it can be a little bit more difficult to, figure out how to reach out, how to build community or relationships. Did you see anything there when it came to the study around how people built some of these relationships?
Yes, we did. Some people were really good at prioritizing relationships. We started calling this social fitness in the book that we just published. And the reason why we did was because we saw an analogy with physical fitness. So with physical fitness, you don't go to the gym and come home and say, I'm done. I don't have to do that again, right? It's an ongoing practice.
We all wish.
And what we found was that the people who were really good at relationships were the people who made it an ongoing practice. So they stayed in touch with people. They organized events. They made sure that they saw the people who they wanted to keep current with in their lives. And what we found was that some people did it more naturally because they grew up in families where they did that. Some people made it a much more deliberate project to do that. What we found too was that there were people who were really good at bringing new people into their lives. So there's one sort of branch of social fitness, if you will, that is strengthening the relationships you already have. So, the people who you really enjoy, but you never get around to seeing, could you make that a priority to see them or to call them? Make it a priority on your commute. So you don't even add any time. You just make sure you talk to somebody on your commute because you want to keep up with their life. Okay, so that's strengthening the relationships you have. But then there are people who are really good at joining clubs, joining religious communities, running clubs, making friends at the gym, gardening clubs, political campaigns, anything. Because one of the things they find, and they've actually done the research on this, is that if you volunteer for something or join something that you care about, you're doing something that means something to you, and you're with the same people over and over again, you share something in common, so it's a natural place to start conversations. And some of those people, because you see them again and again, you'll start to have deeper and deeper conversations with, and then maybe a few of those people will become friends. It's one of the most reliable ways to bring new people into your life through activities that you care about.
And so, I mean, when you mentioned the strengthening existing relationships, I think a lot of people, at least that I know, have relationships that are all over the country or even all over the world. Do we internally know the difference between a relationship that exists that we're deepening but is just over the phone? Or do you mean that we have to be in person with people in order to experience this? Especially because also I think with Instagram and TikTok, so many people do communicate now through those mediums and stay in touch that way.
Right. Well, my wife's best friend has lived on the West Coast and we live on the East Coast. She lived on the West Coast for 25 years. They talk every week on the phone. My co-author, Mark Schultz, who I wrote the book with, and he's been my research partner. We talk every Friday at noon. He lives in Philadelphia. I almost never see him, maybe once a year. But, he's one of my very closest friends. So I think that a lot of it has to do with time, putting in the time in conversation. And yes, in person is great. And we always love it when we get together in person. But maintaining the connection doesn't have to be in person.
Which is great news, I think, for a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the study, was there anything that really moved you when you were thinking about what makes a good life?
Well, I think the stories that move me now are because I'm closer to the end of my life than the beginning of my life. And so I'm getting older. And the stories that moved me were the one we started the book with, where the man and wife are being interviewed and they're asked the question, what's your greatest fear? And the man finally comes around to saying, my greatest fear is that you'll die first and I'll be left here without you. And then the other thing that moved me was when we asked people when they were in their 80s, what's life like for you now? One man wrote to us on his questionnaire, he said, my wife and I feel like these are like enjoying the last days of a great vacation together.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I just love this analogy of the final days of a great vacation. You mentioned, feeling like you're closer to the end of your life than the beginning. I'm curious what's changed for you, post going through this research and looking at these people and these stories. What's different for you in your life in the way that you live it every day?
I worry less about small stuff, right? I try to worry less and I can put it in perspective sooner where I say, wait a minute, 50 years from now, I'll be dead. Is this going to matter? Even 5 years from now, is this going to matter to me? I take that perspective more. And I ask a question of myself that one of my teachers asked, which is, what do you want to live in the world after you're gone? Because you were here. And that helps me kind of orient myself. What do I want to have be here in the world, even when I'm no longer here?
How do you answer that question?
Well, I'm doing a lot of this, actually. I gave a TED Talk and that went viral, right? And initially I thought this is the most obvious thing. People are going to laugh me off the stage, right? Because I'm going to get up there and say relationships are important. Well, the TED Talk, went viral because people were hungry for more information about why this matters, how it matters, right? And so my priority now is to say, okay, I'm not going to publish as many scientific papers in journals that nobody reads. I'm going to spend my time and my energy while I still have it talking about these ideas because they matter so much for our lives.
Yeah.
So, that's why I get to talk with people like you. It's a real privilege to get to talk about this, right? And to bring these ideas to more people.
I love that you say that because a big part of what I learned as I was starting to get deeper into this work and I was picking up every book I could because I was so interested in really like the human experience and the things that we didn't learn in school that I think we should have been learning instead of geometry.
Yes.
About how to live a life and how to show up for ourselves and relationships and all of these things that I think would make us all a lot more intentional in the way that we choose to guide our lives at any given time.
Yes.
And I found that a lot of people, and I think this is still true, don't necessarily get to access information like what you've created. And now, of course, you're out in the world sharing it, but there's so many things out there that, academics and storytellers and all of these people are talking about that we don't necessarily have access to that could be so powerful. And I'm like, the thing I want to do most is get it to people who need it and who are asking questions and then realize, oh God, I didn't do this thing at all intentionally. And now I understand why. Because I think it's like the why is what powers the choice to actually do it and the behavior.
Yeah. And it helps guide us in how to go forward because we're having to make decisions all day, every day. How do we make them? And if we can help people say, okay, this is what I care about the most, and this is what I think is most important, that's going to help me choose one thing over another, moment after moment.
Okay, so what sort of questions are you asking now? You're 21 years into your time as the director of this study. What questions do you still have that are out there and you'd want to sort of leave as your mark?
Well, first of all, I think my mark is going to fade away, and that's okay. But I'd like other people to pick up the ball and go with it. And I think some of how the digital revolution is going to affect all of this that we're talking about, how it is affecting us. I want to know more about that. And there's research going on. There's going to continue to be research going on that will tell us How is this shaping us? How can we shape it better? How can we use it better? Right now, what we're seeing is that the path of least resistance in using digital technology, that has its problems, that it's got great things too, but it's got real problems. So now how do we become much more intentional in how we use and manage this new technology? So that's what I'd love to know more about. I'm not going to be the one who finds out those answers.
Is there anything else that I haven't gotten to ask you that you feel like you'd love to leave our listeners with?
Well, in the last chapter of the book, we titled it, It's Never Too Late. And that's what I would leave people with. So what that means for us is people are sure they know how their lives are going, right? And I know how my life is going to turn out. And many people say that in a negative way. I'm no good at relationships. I'm never going to meet anyone. I'm never going to have friends. That's just not going to happen for me. And studying all these lives, what we find is that it's never too late to have new things happen that actually can be quite beneficial in your life. There are people who found friends in their 60s and 70s for the first time. There are people who found love in their 80s. And so the message is really just, if you are sure that it's too late for you in some major aspect of your life, don't be so sure. Stay open to possibilities.
Think again. Got it. All right, I'm going to have you complete these 3 statements for me.
Okay.
Better humans are
more self-knowing and self-accepting.
Better work is
with others.
Oh, I love that. It's the first time I've gotten that answer. I love that. And a better world has
more compassion.
How do you define compassion?
Feeling with other people and acting from that place of understanding how someone else feels.
Love that. It's like empathy in action kind of thing. Yeah, I love that. Bob, thank you so much for being here. I think the biggest learning for me from your work is like we make it a lot more complicated than it needs to be. Yeah. It feels so simple as you describe it. And of course, life can feel complicated and complex, but the ways that we kind of create a good life for ourselves are a lot simpler than maybe we think.
I think that's right. That's what we find. This has been a pleasure talking with you.
Yes,
what a treat.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been great. Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you for the work you're doing. This is really good stuff. This is really important.
That was Dr. Bob Waldinger, psychiatrist, Zen master, and director of the Harvard Study of Adult Development. If this conversation resonated with you, share it with the first person who comes to mind. You never know how it could help them out. And support other people like you in finding our show by leaving us a rating before you go. While you're at it, write a 1-sentence review telling me and the team what you love about Everyday Better. And as always, you can get me in your inbox by signing up for our weekly personal development newsletter, giving you practical tips on how to level up with small steps every day. Find it in our show notes for this episode or at linkedin.com/everydaybetter. That's linkedin.com/everydaybetter. Everyday Better is a production of LinkedIn News. The show is produced by Grace Rubin and Emily Reeves. Asaf Gadron is our sound engineer. He makes sure we sound good in the studio. Tim Boland mixed this episode. Enrique Montalvo is the executive producer of LinkedIn Editorial Productions. Dave Pond is head of news production. Courtney Koop is head of LinkedIn Original Audio and Video. Dan Roth is the editor-in-chief of LinkedIn. And I'm Leah Smart. Thanks for coming with me, and I'll see you next week.